one. Bingo! ThinkTech TV, ThinkTech Hawaii. Here we are talking about Iolani Moon Riders with Robert Kelso, who's the Executive Director of the Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
Pisces.
Pisces, not the fish.
Not the fish. Anyway, this is really interesting. You know, Hawaii has an edge to it. We've seen traces of it here and there. We've heard from Gene Ward about it. We know that Representative Angus McKelvey likes it, and Senator Willis Barrow, they like it. And so there's a certain amount of interest in the legislature and in DBED. In fact, DBED has a kind of department about it.
That's right.
Are you DBED?
We are under DBED.
You're DBED?
Yes, we're a program assigned to DBED. That's
okay.
Right.
Well, tell us, well, welcome to the show. Robert.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's great to be here on ThinkTech Hawaii and this wonderful starry background that we got.
Like that, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, we don't fool around.
No, you high tech.
So are you a space person?
I am. Very much so.
Aerospace industry?
Yeah, by the 5th grade, I knew that I wanted to be involved in the space program.
What? You were an astronomer?
I wanted to be either an astronaut or a flight director. And so from the 5th grade, I knew what to take in junior high and high school, and started with NASA right out of high school.
NASA was so dramatic and romantic a few years ago.
Oh, gee.
Now you don't. Now you worry about their funding.
That's right.
Everybody's funding. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be a part of the heyday of shuttle. I was the shuttle flight director, directing 25 shuttle missions. And I worked I was responsible for the very first Department of Defense mission flight 30 years ago that astronaut Ellison Onizuka, the first Hawaii astronaut, flew on. Yeah. So Ellison and I were very close for 3.5 years, getting ready for his first launch.
Until he died. That was too bad. You were in Cape Kennedy then?
No, at the Johnson Space Center. I was in the Mission Control Center in Houston.
Okay.
So right after the Challenger accident in January of 1986, I was selected as a flight director in 1988, the class of 1988, along with 2 other people. And
what's a flight director?
A flight director. Have you ever seen the movie Apollo 13?
Yes.
With Tom Hanks?
Yes.
So the guy in the white vest says, failure's not an option, not going to happen on my shift. That's what I did. And so I did.
You weren't an astronaut.
But I wasn't an astronaut. My eyes were too bad.
You controlled all those guys.
But I controlled all of them, yeah.
Okay.
So the flight director is responsible for the astronauts, the space shuttle, the billion-dollar payload in it, the worldwide tracking network, the large mission control center. So
no pressure.
No pressure. What a great time though in my career. It just never got better than that.
So what happened between the time you decided you want to be an astronomer, an astronaut, a space person, and the time you got involved with NASA? Were you in the service or anything?
No. I was taking all my math and science courses in high school. And then the year that I was going to graduate from high school, they had formed a junior cooperative education program where they hired 20 minority students from the Houston, Galveston area to come work for NASA right after high school and during the Christmas time of your freshman year. And I was able to sneak into that. And then I was a cooperative education student with my university, graduated in 4 years.
What university was that?
Austin College, small school in north of Dallas. Got my degree in physics, and then came work full-time at NASA. I was doing research and development in the engineering directorate for a number of years until I got drafted to be a flight controller in the space shuttle program, and was very fortunate to be a flight controller on the very first shuttle flight, STS-1, April 1981.
Oh, you've seen it.
Yeah, it's been a great time.
So I wanted to ask you, I just ask questions that come to mind.
That's all right.
Forgive me that. But you've been involved in probably the most high-tech, most creative technology in the world, because it's always first impression. It's always an idea that's probably limited to space travel rather than consumer requirements. And so you're always inventing everything, not only the equipment and the software, but the systems, the integrated systems that go into a space shoot. So what's that like? And you don't get it on the first try. There's a certain amount of experimentation. There's a certain amount of, I will do this. I'm determined to get this right. I'm determined to invent something that will solve this problem we've You know, what an incredible experience that is, just in terms of the technology.
Yeah, and I was very blessed by being involved in a number of flights and shuttle flights in the 80s and 90s that had never been done before. So we didn't know how to do them. So we had to innovatively, creatively think how we're going to do these things that have never flown in a space shuttle before. So the space shuttle was like the old B-17 bomber. It could do a lot of, have you?
Yes.
And you know, and it had so much redundancy like the B-17. You know, it had four of everything. You know, in case you lose one, you keep on flying.
Yeah.
And it could do so many missions between astronomy and Earth observations, deploying satellite, repairing satellites. And so it was very versatile to do a lot of creative type of missions. And it was during that time period that I was a flight director.
Yeah, so you were the guy who was at least supervising the solution to all these new problems.
Yeah, and you know, I like to share that it was very much like going to school. So it took usually, on a complex mission, 3.5 years to put one flight together. So as a flight director, you always had about 3 or 4 missions in flow. You were flying one in 6 months, another one in 18 months, and you were a lead for one 3.5 years out.
Sort of a grouping thing.
Right, so we would go to meetings to write procedures, develop flight rules, and then 3 months before flight, we would go to the control center and the astronauts would go to the mission simulator and we would practice these missions from liftoff to landing, satellite deployments, spacewalks, every move.
Yeah.
And there was a group over behind the curtains that were the simulation team, and they would insert mission failures into the computers unbeknownst to us. And we would have to solve those.
Oh, that was tricky.
Oh, very tricky.
But you knew they were going to do it.
Well, you knew, but not which ones.
You didn't know what it was.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But they'd say, are you ready to go? And we'd say, yeah. And then, boy, the failures would start happening.
Oh, gee whiz.
And you were trained to be able to handle up to 25 failures over a 30-minute to 1 hour period. And the goal was to be able to prioritize risk. Assess risk versus gain, risk versus risk.
On the spot, standing there.
So there were 17 consoles in the control center, each responsible for different shuttle systems. And everybody had their own issues. Everybody wanted you to work their issue. So as a flight director, you had to prioritize which ones had the most seriousness or most impact that you had to deal with now, and then have the crew work on those. So it was very effective in preparing you for flight. So then you were graded on those, just like practice exams.
But they had special guys come in and watch you then.
And you were evaluated.
Oh,
and then final exam was the real flight itself. And the training, I have to say, was so high fidelity that from a control center standpoint, you didn't know that you really weren't flying. It looked like you were doing a space mission. So when failures happened in the real thing, you go, wait a second, is this real or is this a simulation? Then you'd have to jerk yourself back and say, no, it's really real. And I'm off attacking that problem.
Wow.
So we were trained to be able...
You learned a lot about flight simulation.
Oh, a lot.
And what you learned, the aircraft industry, airline industry could use, yeah?
Yes.
And of course, military. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's exactly right. And so, that training prepared you for how to think, to balance operational risk for the actual mission. Because it's true, you've heard Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. Well, that's true about spaceflight. But there's a Kelso corollary to that. And the Kelso corollary is that not only can things go wrong, but they'll go wrong on the worst possible mission or the worst possible part of the orbit.
Full Murphy.
Yeah, if it happened on some other mission, it wouldn't be a big deal, but because it happened now in this orbit or on this mission, it was a big deal. So it always seemed to happen to me.
Of course. But that's what the other guys said also.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
You know, what strikes me is, this is all a training for everything, not just space travel.
No,
with
that's
prioritization,
yes,
dealing with Murphy's Law, being resilient on every decision you make, always being alert to the possibility. This is life training.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, because it was a specific mindset of how you think, how you ask questions, how you measure risk. And so in 2000, I was sent up to the Houston Technology Center. And this technology center was a nonprofit set up by the city of Houston to help accelerate entrepreneurial technology companies.
For
so that
All technology, all technology.
oil and gas
Yeah, of
technology,
course.
IT,
Yeah,
biotech, and space, because those were the center for critical technology resident in the Houston area. And what they were finding is that these companies were failing early, or they would leave to go to other parts of the country. So Houston wanted to invest in these high technology companies and accelerate them through the business pipeline so they would reduce the risk of failure. So I was brought in to run for 18 months the aerospace sector. So I didn't know what a term sheet was, a deal sheet, a Series A round, a Series C round, friends, full money, angel investment, all of these things. I didn't know what that was. But I learned pretty quickly. But what was interesting is I would sit into these deal review meetings, and they would ask me to ask any questions that I have. So I would just jump into flight director mode and start asking these questions. It was all tied to risk.
All to determined risk, right?
Yeah.
You have
Financial
to get
risk,
your picture,
business risk. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was able to adapt a lot of the learning that I had accumulated through the shuttle program in managing technical risk, spaceflight risk, into business risk. And then I adapted that into.
But the principles are the same.
The principles are the same. And I'll apply that same thinking into managing budgets, or human resources, or business development, or business strategic planning.
Talk shows.
So it's a way, talk shows. So it's how you manage risk, right? It's, and that was all, that came about through operational experience. You could not get that in college, right? It's all about situational learning and experiential learning in managing risk.
Slight tangent, okay?
Yes.
So you're in the aerospace industry, which I guess you'll agree with me, the aerospace industry is an oblique off the military. It is a federal program, and it is, sort of driven by what we have learned in the military, and it's operated to a certain degree anyway, like the military, okay? And, I've always felt that kind of experience is good for you.
Yes.
In your civilian life.
Right.
And therefore, being in the military and being in the space program, teaches you more than just service of country. It teaches you those kinds of risk analyses things that you need to know for life in civilian world.
That's right.
And I, didn't like terminating the draft at the time. Recently, I ran into the lawyer who was actually assigned in the Pentagon to terminating the draft. It was his job. He was the transition operator. Really, not a great job, really. But, the point is that without that, this nexus you are describing doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You'd have to actually be in aerospace to have the benefit. You'd have to actually be in the service, but you don't find the whole country going through that process. Better if they did.
I'll share with you another observation that's seemed apparent to me, is that, again, I was very blessed in that through my whole career, from the time I started with NASA out of high school, all the way to today, I've always had a senior mentor in my life. Someone that's guiding me and assisting me and asking me hard questions, whether that was in the flight director office. Gene Kranz was a great mentor of mine. He was the flight director that landed the guys on the moon, Buzz and Neil.
Guidance. It's really about guidance, and I feel a strong guidance now that makes me want to, make this a cliffhanger for the next leg of our journey in space. We got to take a break.
Oh, okay.
I feel guided.
Let's follow your guidance.
Inertial. Robert Kelso, who's executive director of Pisces, which is Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems with DBED. This is ThinkTech Talks on a given Wednesday. And we're talking about Iolani moon riders, and we're just working our way into that. I'm really enjoying this. We'll be right back. You'll see.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, We talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
Okay, we're back, we're live, and we're ruminating with Robert Kelso, Executive Director of Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems. Here on ThinkTech Talks, talking about Iolani moon riders. And before we get to that, we need to know, we're sort of forming up on this. We're getting our signals straight, and I'm really enjoying this. So before I interrupted you, Robert, you were talking about mentorship.
Right.
And I really need to have this discussion. So what were you saying?
And you're making me really think tech here today. You know,
It's part of tech, isn't it? Mentorship is part of tech.
It is. It's a way of thinking. And so as I had mentioned, I have been always blessed to have a senior mentor in my life at all stages of my career, even today. But my sense is that we don't do that well with the next generation, that they are not benefiting from senior mentors in their life like I was. And that's an area that I'm really trying to work. I just as an aside, I love the Pacific Aviation Museum over on Ford Island.
Yeah,
Jay, you've probably been there.
Yeah.
And I'm really good friends with those people, and I'm trying between my organization and the Pacific Aviation Museum, look at how we can create in Oahu some forums that provide senior level mentoring and lessons learned in leadership to the next generation of entrepreneurs, and then maybe expand that statewide. I just think it's an area lacking.
Yeah, I
Just
agree.
as you know, an example, when I was over, we brought our large planetary rover into Oahu at Pearl when it came over from Canada on its way to the test site in Big Island. And we introduced it there at Pacific Aviation Museum. And I was speaking to one of their board of directors that night, and his name was Colonel Coffey. And,
yes,
and he
we've
was.
had him here at this
Have
table.
you?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't really know who he was. He and I were just chatting away, and I said, well, you know, you were in the military? Yes, sir. I was in the Navy. I flew jets. How many carriers too? And we just talked on and on. It wasn't until after he had gone to get something to eat that I realized he was a prisoner of war for 7+ years.
And very famous.
And very famous by flying low altitude flights over Cuba for President Kennedy and taking high resolution imaging. So, you know, what I realized is that we have stellar leaders that have either retired here or still in place here in Hawaii. And all we have to do is tap into those type of people like Colonel Coffey to help provide lessons learned and the values that they've established within their life, how they lead their life, how they lead people and organizations, to the benefit of the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up in the state of Hawaii.
Absolutely. And it's so important for business, for entrepreneurship, for technology to do that. And except in limited pockets, we don't do it. And even in those pockets, I'm not sure that it's as robust as it might be.
Yeah, I think, yep.
You want that young entrepreneur to feel that there are people out there that will be in loco parentis, who will really care about him, who will not blame him if he fails, you know, who will offer him all the advice, all the life advice they can. It's a wonderful miracle kind of thing when it happens. So how can we encourage it? How can we make it happen on a larger scale, as you say?
So I think this even falls under ThinkTech type of approaches. And I think what we need to do is establish some forums. It doesn't have to be expensive, but just a place to meet and invite some people that are senior leaders from the military or from other private sector governments or industries, and have them come and share their values and leadership. What does leadership mean? What are the skills that were important to them? What would they pass on to the next generation? And then invite business leaders and entrepreneurs to come and benefit from that.
Yeah.
It's a way of mentoring and passing on values and knowledge.
And you absolutely have to have it if you're in a challenging industry.
Yeah.
You know, as something you can, it's efficiency. It's it's collapsing the generations and giving you the benefit of his knowledge. You know, I mean, not that it's directly on point, but I was struggling with a computer issue for weeks. I could not figure it out. And finally, I made an appointment already. An appointment, now you gotta make an appointment, at 6 o'clock in the morning with a guy from Adobe. I don't know where in the world he was, okay? And he answered my question in the first minute. And then he told me about the thought process, about how I could do that kind of analysis myself. And, you know, he took me to another level of appreciating, you know, the vagaries of computer programming right there. He was my mentor.
Wow.
And he was probably a half or a third of my age. You know? It doesn't matter.
Well, that's the other point is that, you know, when I look at the next generation past me or the one following that, they're so much smarter than what you and I were, right? They have so much more skills, but at the same time, we're not providing that leadership and mentoring that we received. And so they're smarter, but we need to come in and also prop them up and help educate and mentor at the same time.
So that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons why the space program here in DBED is important for people to know about, to appreciate, and to participate in, and in any event, support. So let's talk about that program.
Okay.
We still have a little time left.
Sure.
You know, what is that program? How to get started? What's the purpose of it? What's the facilities and the staffing for it? Tell us.
You're talking about Moonriders?
Yes.
Okay. So this actually, there's an interesting story about that. So when I came in to work for NASA, Jay, it was in May of 1973. So I missed the last lunar landing on the moon by 6 months, December of 1972. And it always bothered me that I wasn't a part of the lunar program. And Gene Kranz, my mentor, said, it's okay. You're going to be living and doing things that I couldn't do or didn't do, and the best days are ahead. And he was right in some of that perspective. But it always bothered me I had not been a part of a moon program. And so back in 2010, when I was with NASA, I was leading Lunar Commercial Services, we met with all the Google Lunar X Prize teams. Now this is the $30 million prize from Google to incentivize the private sector to create a private way of getting to the moon. And Google's thought here is developing a new technology of industry that is separate from the federal government that provides cheap transportation of items to the lunar surface. And the winner of that would get $30 million. So
what about the IP?
They keep all the IP.
They keep
yeah,
all the,
yeah,
Google does.
No, all the private sectors.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Google just putting up the prize money to incentivize the technology development of creating a private initiative to launch, cruise, and land on the surface of the moon.
That's very charitable.
Not NASA, but the private sector.
Yeah.
And a number of these groups are beginning to pop up. So back in 2010, we met with about 18 to 20 of these teams to ask them the question of how could NASA take advantage of these private landers in getting science or technology delivered as a rideshare payload or a host payload on these private lander platforms where we, NASA, could benefit from getting to the surface of the moon without having to pay for our lander ourselves. How could we go along for the ride and get value?
Yeah.
And so Moonriders is actually the first tangible outcome of that thinking. So NASA has been working on an issue of planetary dust and how to get rid of the dust for many years. If
What's
you look
wrong
at,
with planetary dust?
Yeah, if you look at Curiosity or the Mars exploration rovers, MER rovers, they get dust all over them.
What is it made of?
It's very fine. In fact, what we see on the moon is the constituency of talcum powder.
Oh.
Extremely fine. But talc is very soft. But on the moon, it's very brittle. It's very abrasive. It's very hard.
Yeah, so that can do damage to the equipment.
Yes, and so it gets into bearings. The face plates on the end of Apollo by the third EVA was so scratched they couldn't see through it hardly. But on Mars and on Moon, it gets on top of solar arrays, radiators, and of course it affects the efficiency. It gets on optics for cameras and television lenses. It gets on spacesuit material. So it turns the white spacesuit material dark, and so being dark, it absorbs more solar energy, which means that the crewman has to use more water to cool the suit. So NASA had been working on technology for 4 or 5 years on how to repel this dust through a high voltage electric field. So it charges these particles and then ejects them off of radiators, spacesuit material, camera lenses, but they couldn't get it to the moon.
But why is the dust falling on the suit in the first place? Is there a magnetic process that's causing it to
Some
cling?
of it is electrostatic, but it's also so brittle and so it has so many little hooks in it that when it touches the suit, it grinds itself in and attaches.
Nanotechnology.
It's hard to brush. You can't even brush it off. It gets
Interesting.
embedded into the layers.
And then it's going to do the abrasive thing.
Right. So now on
Yeah.
Mars, you get a dust devil, a tornado in the thin atmosphere. Occasionally they'll come along the rover and it'll sweep the dust off. And then all of a sudden you get all your power back and you can radiate heat. On Moon, you can't do that. But even on Mars, you have to hope that you get a dust devil. So this technology would repulse the dust.
Wind.
Little wind.
And going in, and it comes at random.
Yep. And then it sweeps it off. The little tornado
It's very interesting.
sweeps the dust off. But you don't have that on Moon.
Okay.
So the technology was, how can we put these systems on planetary rovers and other systems, robots, that it would displace the dust, get rid of the dust so that you can continue to have your efficient operations. So NASA's been working on that 4 or 5 years, but it's not going to the moon. President Obama says you're going to an asteroid. So they have this technology, but they can't flight test it. And so we see this interesting technology do loop that other planetary systems, like at Mars, don't want to use the dust removal technology because it hasn't been flight tested, but they can't get it on one of these things to Moon or Mars to flight test. So you get into this do loop. So I put together a plan with NASA Kennedy Space Center that we would find a way to fly it. And it involves 4 interesting groups. One is the federal sector with NASA, that's the technology. The state sector, which is Pisces. The private sector of technology, which is the Google Lunar X Prize teams that would launch, cruise, and land to get the technology on the moon. And then we want to involve science, technology, engineering, and math, and academics. Do you know that in the state of Hawaii in 2013, 8th grade testing showed that our state in Hawaii ranks 46 out of 50 in science, technology, and engineering and math testing?
I'm
46.
Sorry. I am sorry to hear that.
So I wanted to put something so compelling, so outrageously innovative, to be a gold standard to help kids get involved in science and technology, engineering, and math, to do something they would never, ever be able to do themselves. So any kid can really get something up on International Space Station or on my day on the Space Shuttle, but there's never been, Jay, never, a high school experiment on the surface of the moon.
Now you're going to tell me that there was one.
No,
that
there will be one.
Okay.
And that's Moonriders. So what we've done is pick 2 Hawaii high schools to be involved in Pisces and NASA in building, developing, and testing a prototype engineering unit to fly to the surface of the moon to demonstrate this dust removal technology. And the high schools will not only be building prototype engineering units, but actual flight hardware to go to the surface of the moon. So imagine a student in an interview with Stanford University or they're with Microsoft when they will apply for a job. And that interviewer says, well, you went to high school at Iolani or Kealakehi High School. You were in the math club and the band, tennis team, what'd you do? Well, sir, I built hardware that is now sitting on the surface of the moon.
Okay. We got to take a break on that. You got to let that sink in. If you're the interviewer, you lean back in your chair, look at the ceiling and say, I think I missed something.
Yes.
It's Robert Kelso, Executive Director of the Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems here in DBED. You're on ThinkTech Talks. We're talking about the Iolani Moon Riders. And if you want to send us a tweet, do that. It's ThinkTech HI. We'll be right back.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon. And on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there, But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidell and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our show on healthcare in Hawaii to talk with leaders from across all the spectrum of health in our state, or you can join us for any other show where we talk about economic development or tourism or some really eclectic programs too. So really, we love to see you here on our show. Thanks for joining us and thanks for supporting us.
Okay, we're back. We're live here on a given Wednesday with Robert Kelso, Executive Director of PICES, that is the Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems. Here on ThinkTech Talks, talking about the Iolani Moon Riders. And just a break for some tweets. We got Henny, and then we got, what did Henny say? Can you move it up a little bit? Okay. Jay Fidell is an Aquarius, and Robert Kelso from Pisces. Hawaii is not a Pisces, but a Capricorn. Well, okay. Thank you, Henny. That straightens it all out for me. We got Pisces, Hawaii. Sure thing. Thank you for having him. We're enjoying the show. Okay, keep on sending those tweets, okay? It's ThinkTech High, right? Okay, so here we are with this kid who has made a device, a testing device that will go to the moon by way of an unmanned surveyor type of vehicle. And this thing is going to be experimenting about moon dust or space dust.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the goal is we've been testing it on Mauna Kea back in March. Now we're taking the lessons learned of that and putting it in the next flight design cycle for the hardware. So it's a small experiment box, about a ½ kilogram, that'll fly on a Google Lunar X Prize private lander to the lunar surface, and then it will be tested. That technology will be tested there between NASA Kennedy and the 2 Hawaii high schools. So we selected 2 high schools out of this. We wanted a public school and then an independent or private school. So the Department of Education, Jay, picked Kealakehi High School on Kona side.
Great choice. I love that high school. It's got such heart, that high school.
It's interesting because that school is in the same district that my friend Ellison Onizuka, Hawaii's first astronaut, came from. He went to Kona Waina. Yeah. And Kealakehi was not there when Ellison went there.
New, yeah.
So Kealakehi has a great robotics program, does world-class competitions in robotics. And then we wanted a second one, high school, that was an independent or private high school. So that's where Iolani came in.
Good combination.
Good combination. And so it's very interesting in the technology, the development of this, because NASA's building a piece, Iolani's building a piece, Kealakehi has to build a piece. So they have to work collaboratively. One group has to depend on the other for a product before they can do their piece. And so there's this shipping of hardware back and forth. It builds interdependency, a systems of systems concept, partnership, collaboration.
Maybe a little mentoring in there.
So NASA is giving them mentoring in lunar dust, in the lunar surface, in lunar technology, about the moon, as well as them being a part of building hardware that is tested and then flown. So why are we this happening right now? So we hope to fly in late 2016, early 2017. We're going back to flight test the flight engineering unit next fall, and it'll go into final flight cycle and then be delivered next spring for the to the launch provider to integrate it into the spacecraft.
Now you got to build one.
So we have.
You got to make it work.
Yep. So that's why we tested it up on Mauna Kea.
So who actually fabricated it?
So Kennedy is building the dust shield.
Yeah.
The 2 schools are building the frame that holds the dust shield in place that attaches into the spacecraft. So the schools are building flight hardware that will go to the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
So why this? Because we see this as important in showing the keiki of Hawaii that there are high-tech opportunities out there.
You know,
that we can bring them into a flight engineering environment where they have to do design, development, test, and evaluation and flight of flight hardware of the moon that no one else in the world has done. And then these kids, Jay, not me, not you, and going into other schools through Hawaii, but these students involved in Moon Riders then go into elementary schools, junior highs, high schools, and explaining to their peers why it's important for them to take science and math. What they learned out of being involved in a flight experiment program in engineering that sends something to the surface of the moon. And we're hopeful that this will spawn a new generation of kids that in Hawaii that now says there is no hope for us. There aren't any high-tech jobs. We can't do anything high-tech. Give them the springboard that says there is something here for you. So it's all tied to workforce development in creating high technology jobs for the state of Hawaii and using homegrown students to start filling that pipeline.
I remember talking to a number of students, some from the neighbor islands, some from Big Island, who won awards in the science fair, the National Science Fair. And I found a common thread there, and it was that when they won the award, they became confident that they could do science. Until that point, it was a struggle for them because they weren't sure they could measure up against the competition. Yeah. Once they found they could measure up against the competition, it changed their whole worldview.
Right.
And I think that's the process that you're talking about here. When these kids, you know, compete and find that they're on the surface of the moon, that they're, you know, their creative product is on the surface of the moon.
Oh.
It lends that kind of confidence to say, well, you're just as good as any other place on Earth or better.
Yep.
And you can do this. And so you, in your life, you can become a scientist or, you know, an astronaut if you like, whatever you want.
So just think, Jay, ThinkTech. This student that has built robots that throw basketballs that land in a hoop, right? Can I build something that is hardware worthy to go to the surface of the moon? I mean, it's one thing to build a robot that goes and picks up Lego blocks and moves them around. But I've got to build something that's critical to success, mission success, that if I don't do that right, that can't fail. Failure's not an option. So it sets a bar extremely high in the way they think, in the way they develop, their ownership of it, their accountability to the flight program. So it raises a whole different set of learning here. And the students are really benefiting from that we're really being a part of an engineering program. And oh my gosh, we really can do this. We can do something other than just move blocks around. We can build critical flight technology that'll benefit things on the Mars, moon, asteroids for many years to come on many other surface systems. And we're integratedly involved in that.
I want more. I'll tell you what I mean. You know, so there's a handful of kids involved doing this, and they will do it. It's happening. It's with your mentorship and help, it is happening. And they will feel great. And their friends will feel great. And anybody who reads about it in the newspaper will feel just great. But it's not enough. You need to have, you know, that whole generation feel the same way.
Yep.
And, you know, share that confidence among even the people who weren't there. It's got to be sort of a generic confidence. So that means more programs like this.
More programs.
More situations where they can succeed to the point where they feel, you know, globally conscious or at least nationally conscious in science and confident in science. And so how do we do, this is my big question for you, Robert, how do we do this?
Boy, you are good. You think tech. You ask those great questions. So we had the same question from one of the school districts. How is this not a one and done, right? A one-off. So I gave that a lot of thought. So I've been having discussions in Japan with the Japanese space program, JAXA, who is looking at flying their own lunar lander, Selene 2, to the lunar surface in 2019 or 2020. So I've been discussing with them, how can we do Moon Riders 2, but involving a flight program with them.
What a great idea.
With the Japanese, because
idea. Yeah.
Japanese and Hawaii are very close. We have, you know, through the state, but especially on Big Island, many Japanese, they feel very comfortable working there. But this time not with high schools. What if we tied a Hawaii high school, University of Hawaii, with a Japanese university, and they have to collaboratively work together. One does avionics, the other does struck and mech, and putting together some type of
struck and mech?
structural and mechanical, the
Engineering.
engineering of it,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And the other does software avionics.
Yeah.
They have to do
Struck
the
and
two.
mech, you heard it here.
Think tech. And the two universities have to collaborate in an engineering fashion to do something they couldn't do apart, and then have that flown on the Japanese lander. And it could be an astronomy experiment from the surface of the moon. Maybe it's a little off-the-shelf robot that roves around the moon. But now have the two universities collaborate. And so we're looking at Japan as maybe the next option for doing
It would be a great
Moonriders
option.
too.
You know, I've made movies about Iolani and other schools and participation in the science fairs in Japan. Most recently, Ritsumeikan, which I think was in February. And the Japanese system, the Japanese kids and students and the teachers were, you know, really accommodating. They brought in other competitors from all over the world. It wasn't just U.S. And it wasn't a competition so much as a show and tell. And this gave our kids a tremendous experience. Every year it's been going on to feel that confidence. And it's not just American national confidence, it's global confidence.
Yes.
They're competing against every country you could think of that does any kind of tech in the high schools.
Right.
And so this is exactly what we need. You know, I think it's a great way to expand the program to reach other kids and bring, you know, raise all the boats higher because of it.
I've got to say, you know, what great support out of both schools, Kealakehi and Iolani, in the mentorship that they're providing, the faculty that they're providing and mentoring these kids in a flight program. The support out of Principal Murakami at Kealakehi.
I met him.
The headmaster at Iolani, Kathy Matayoshi.
Yeah.
You know, the district superintendent
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah.
the director of education.
Yeah.
Big Island girl,
whatever, yeah.
Hilo High. You know, very supportive of Moonriders. They understand the importance of this as it relates to moving Hawaii and Hawaii students forward in technology for the future. NASA benefits of it from technology development and testing to move its readiness level of this on the surface of the moon. Hawaii's benefit is in workforce development, in technology thinking within its student population.
Well, that's the other side of things. So now I give these kids confidence. I give them some training in very advanced, you know, tech processes, science. And they're likely, with that confidence, to go to the mainland, go to a tech school in the mainland. Now our job is to get them back here with jobs.
Yep.
And the question is, you know, how can we do that? I mean, you guys in DBED, it's not just you, and it's not just the Iolani Moonriders, but, you know, there's a Space Center movement. It's a national movement, isn't it, involving,
Yes.
You know, state economic development organizations and high schools and colleges to try to get people to study space, kids and students and faculty to study space. So can we do that? Can we invent jobs here for that?
Yeah, and I would tell you, and maybe I should have mentioned it right at the beginning, but in Pisces, as a state program, we see very importantly our main goal, our vision, our objective in the organization as developing high technology workforce, economic development, and jobs, and bringing in industry, aerospace industries to the state of Hawaii through the applied research and innovative work that we do in robotics or planetary surface systems. So we see ourselves very passionately of being a major element in helping to bring on an emerging workforce and technology jobs for this state. In my dealings at the state level, at South Baratania Street, over there at the Capitol, in the business community and in the schools that I talk to, it always comes down to providing, you know, can we develop high technology jobs for this state? Can we provide the students, the kiki of this state, an avenue where they don't have to go to the mainland, but that high technology jobs are here. That's why last year we had 10 to 12 university students that were all Hawaii kids, but from 5 universities working for us in planetary surface characterization and geology, volcanology, and the other half were working in planetary robotic systems, building flight software for a planetary rover.
You know, yesterday this very chair was Mark Takai, Congressman Mark Takai, who talked about sort of the resurrection of the Dan Inouye, experience in bringing money to these islands. And one of the items that he was talking about, which was included in a press release yesterday, I think, was $30 million for Pacific Missile Range. But there, you know, it's not that much, and it's not that directly related to kids, but you can see that there's a possibility of, you know, getting more money, more funding for this kind of thing through our delegation. So in closing, you might want to contact him. He's in town now. You can
Sure.
talk to his local office, and maybe there's a good connection here.
We see actually within the state of Hawaii, small satellite launch capability being very attractive to Big Island because, Jay, of the geologic location, mid-Pacific location here of Hawaii. We're at 19.5-degree latitude. The closer you get to the equator, the cheaper it is for a rocket to get pounds to orbit. So we are actually looking at how we can develop a new industry, both air launch and fixed pad launch, for small satellite launch capability that would represent jobs for the state of Hawaii.
From your lips to God's ears, Robert Kelso, Executive Director of the Pacific International Space Center of Exploration Systems. Sorry, we're out of time. This has been a discussion of Iolani Moon Riders here on ThinkTech Talks. Thanks so much, Robert.
Thanks for having me on ThinkTech.
Aloha.